He kicked me out over her lies. Now they're homeless, and I shut the door. My brother kicked me out over his wife's lies. Now they're homeless with kids, and I refuse to let them step foot in my home again. I was kicked out over lies I didn't even know were being told. And now they want to stay in my home. 3 years ago, I was completely broken. Fresh out of Northwestern University with a communications degree that felt worthless, working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner in Chicago, scraping together barely enough for ramen noodles and instant coffee. My student loans were crushing me, my bank account showed negative numbers more often than positive ones, and I was living in a studio apartment so small you could touch both walls with your arms stretched out. That's when my older brother Jake called me. "Evelyn, you sound terrible," he said, his voice filled with genuine concern. "Why don't you come stay with me and Brittany in our place in Naperville? We've got that guest room just sitting empty. You could save money, get back on your feet." I remember crying with relief. Jake had always been my protector growing up, the one who stood up to bullies and helped me with homework. When our parents died in that car accident during my sophomore year, he'd been the one to hold me together at the funeral, promising we'd always have each other. "Are you sure Brittany's okay with this?" I asked, knowing how territorial some wives could be about their space. "Of course," Jake assured me. "She suggested it, actually. Said family should stick together." I packed my meager belongings into garbage bags and took the metro train out to their beautiful colonial house with the white picket fence and perfectly manicured lawn. Everything I owned fit into their guest room with space to spare. Jake gave me a spare key and told me to make myself at home. "Stay as long as you need, sis. We're family." Brittany was 5 months pregnant then, glowing with that expectant mother radiance, her blonde hair always perfectly styled, her makeup flawless even at breakfast. She was polite but distant, offering tight smiles and brief nods when I thanked her for letting me stay. I was determined to earn my keep. Every morning before my shift at Murphy's Diner, I'd make coffee and breakfast for everyone. I'd vacuum, do laundry, scrub bathrooms until they sparkled. I couldn't contribute much financially, barely enough to cover my car insurance and cell phone, but I made sure they knew how grateful I was. "You don't have to do all this," Jake would say, finding me reorganizing their pantry or cleaning out their garage. "I want to," I'd insist. "It's the least I can do." But I noticed things. The way Brittany's jaw would tighten when she saw me cooking in her kitchen. How she'd rearrange things after I cleaned, as if marking her territory. The little comments that felt like gentle pushes toward the door. Then came the night that changed everything. "You know, once the baby comes, we'll really need that space for a nursery," Brittany mentioned casually one evening as we watched television. She was folding tiny onesies, her hands moving with practiced precision over the soft cotton. Jake looked up from his laptop. "The nursery's going in our room for now, remember? We talked about this." "Well, yes, but eventually." She trailed off, shooting me a meaningful glance. I felt my stomach drop but forced a smile. "Of course. I'll definitely be out of your hair soon. Just need to save up for a security deposit." "Take your time, Evelyn," Jake said firmly. "There's no rush." But Brittany's comment planted a seed of anxiety that grew larger each day. I started working double shifts at Murphy's, coming home exhausted but determined to save every penny. The diner was a classic American spot, red vinyl booths, checkered floors, a jukebox that played Patsy Cline and Elvis. The regulars were mostly truckers and night shift workers, decent people who tipped fairly and never gave me trouble. I'd serve them coffee and apple pie, hash browns and meatloaf, always with a smile despite the ache in my feet and the worry gnawing at my chest. Every dollar went into a mason jar hidden in my dresser drawer, my escape fund, my ticket to independence. The comments from Brittany became more frequent, more pointed. "I saw this cute apartment complex advertising 1 bedrooms," she'd say, sliding a newspaper clipping across the breakfast table. Or, "My friend Kennedy just moved into the nicest place downtown. Very affordable for someone starting out." I'd nod and thank her for thinking of me, but the apartments she suggested were all twice what I could afford. Jake seemed oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, coming home from his job at the marketing firm tired and distracted, talking about client presentations and quarterly reports. "How's the job search coming?" he'd ask during dinner, and I'd update him on my applications to communications firms and non-profit organizations, trying to sound optimistic despite the constant rejections. "Something will come through," he'd say confidently. You're smart and talented. Just give it time. Time. That seemed to be the one thing Brittany was unwilling to give me. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. I just finished a particularly brutal 12-hour shift. The diner had been swamped, the coffee machine had broken down, and I'd dealt with 3 difficult customers who'd left me questioning my life choices. I came home soaked and exhausted, looking forward to a hot shower and maybe leftover Chinese takeout. Instead, I found Brittany waiting for me in the living room, her expression cold and calculating. "We need to talk," Brittany said, her voice eerily calm. She was sitting on their cream-colored sectional sofa, one hand resting on her rounded belly, the other clutching a cup of chamomile tea. The soft glow from the table lamps made her look almost angelic, which made what happened next even more chilling. I set down my purse and kicked off my shoes, suddenly aware of how I must look, hair disheveled from the rain, uniform stained with coffee and ketchup, exhaustion written across my face. "Sure, what's up?" "I think you've been acting inappropriately toward me," she said, her blue eyes never leaving mine. I laughed, actually laughed, because the accusation was so absurd. "What do you mean?" "Flirty," she continued, her voice maintaining that unsettling calm. "The way you look at me, the comments you make, how you touch my arm when you're talking. It makes me uncomfortable." The smile died on my lips. "Brittany, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never." "Jake's noticed it too," she interrupted, and those 4 words hit me like a physical blow. "We've talked about it. He's concerned about having you here with the baby coming." My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was calculated, strategic. She wasn't just suggesting I'd been inappropriate, she was claiming my own brother had agreed with her assessment. "That's not true," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I would never." "I think it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay," she said, setting down her teacup with a soft clink. "Soon." I stood there in their pristine living room, with its carefully arranged throw pillows and family photos on the mantel, feeling like I was drowning. The walls seemed to be closing in, and I could smell her vanilla candles mixing with the scent of the pot roast she'd made for dinner, a dinner I apparently wasn't welcome to share. "I need to talk to Jake," I managed to say. "He's at his Tuesday night basketball league at the community center," she replied smoothly. "Won't be back until late." "But Evelyn." She stood up, smoothing down her maternity sweater. "He already knows how we both feel about this situation." I watched her walk toward the stairs, each step deliberate and final. At the bottom of the staircase, she turned back to me. "I'm sure you understand. We have to protect our family." That night, I sat in the guest room that had been my sanctuary for 4 months, staring at the walls covered in generic inspirational prints. Home is where the heart is and family is everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't sleep. I couldn't eat the sandwich I'd made. I just sat there, replaying every interaction I'd had with Brittany, searching for any moment that could have been misinterpreted. Coming up empty every time. When Jake came home, I heard their muffled voices through the thin walls, but I couldn't make out the words. What I could hear was the tone, serious, concerned, final. The next morning would bring consequences I never saw coming. I woke up to the sound of boxes being stacked in the hallway. My heart sank before my mind could fully process what I was seeing. There, lined up against the wall like discarded trash, were cardboard boxes filled with my belongings. My clothes, my books, my framed photo of our parents, the coffee mug Jake had given me for my birthday, everything that made that guest room feel like home. Jake was in the kitchen, fully dressed for work, avoiding my eyes as he poured coffee into his travel mug. The same mug I'd bought him last Christmas with "World's Best Brother" printed on the side. "Jake." My voice came out smaller than I intended. He finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my brother's eyes: doubt. Not anger, not disgust, but doubt. Which somehow hurt worse than hatred would have. "I think it's time," he said quietly, still not meeting my gaze directly. "Brittany's been feeling uncomfortable, and with the baby coming." "The things she said aren't true," I interrupted, desperation creeping into my voice. "Jake, you know me. You've known me my entire life. I would never." "She's my wife, Evelyn." The words came out flat, final. "She's carrying my child. I have to trust her. But I'm your sister." The words exploded out of me. Doesn't that count for anything? Don't you want to hear my side? He ran his hand through his hair, the same gesture he'd made as a kid when he was struggling with a difficult math problem. I don't want this to get ugly. I just think it's better if you find somewhere else to stay. Where? I laughed bitterly. Where exactly am I supposed to go, Jake? You know I don't have money for a deposit. You know I've been saving every penny. You can stay with the Hartmans, he said, referring to our elderly neighbors from childhood. I already called Mrs. Hartman. She said you could use their basement for a few days while you figure things out. A few days. He was giving me a few days to rebuild my entire life because his wife had decided I was a threat to their perfect suburban bubble. You packed my things without even talking to me first, I said, staring at the boxes that represented the complete dismantling of the only stability I'd had since college. Brittany did it. She thought it would be easier this way. Of course she did. Efficient, clean, final. No messy confrontations, no opportunities for me to defend myself or present evidence of my innocence. Just boxes in a hallway and a brother who couldn't look me in the eye. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him see how wrong this was. Instead, I found myself nodding numbly. Fine. Give me an hour to get my car loaded. Evelyn. Don't. I held up my hand. Just don't. I spent the next hour carrying box after box out to my beat-up Honda Civic, the same car I'd driven to their house full of hope and gratitude 4 months earlier. Neighbors pretended not to watch from their windows as I made trip after trip, my life reduced to cardboard containers and garbage bags. Jake left for work without saying goodbye. Brittany watched from the upstairs window, her hand resting on her belly, looking like a queen surveying her conquered territory. As I drove away from that perfect house with its white picket fence, I made myself a promise that would carry me through the dark months ahead. The Hartmans' basement smelled like mothballs and forgotten Christmas decorations. Mrs. Hartman, bless her heart, had cleared out a corner and set up a card table with a hot plate, but it was still a basement, concrete floors, exposed pipes, the constant hum of the water heater. It was temporary, she reminded me gently. Just until I could find something permanent. I spent 3 days there, sleeping on an air mattress that slowly deflated each night, waking up on the cold floor by morning. During the day, I worked at Murphy's Diner, smiling at customers and pretending my world hadn't imploded. During the night, I scrolled through apartment listings on my phone, doing math that never worked out in my favor. You're looking rough, honey, said Dolores, the day shift manager who'd become something of a mother figure to me. She was a tough woman in her 50s who'd raised 4 kids as a single mom and had opinions about everything. What's going on? So I told her. The whole story, from Brittany's accusation to Jake's betrayal to my current situation. Dolores listened without interruption, occasionally refilling my coffee cup. Men, she said finally, shaking her head. They think with their dicks and their hearts, never their brains. Your brother's an idiot. He chose her, I said simply. And now you get to choose yourself. Dolores knew someone who had a friend subletting a studio apartment above a laundromat in a rougher part of Chicago. It wasn't much, 400 square feet, shared bathroom down the hall, the constant sound of washing machines and dryers below, but it was mine. The deposit cleaned out my savings completely. I moved in with nothing but my boxes and a determination that surprised me. This wasn't just about having a roof over my head, this was about proving to myself that I could survive anything. The apartment came furnished with a Murphy bed that pulled down from the wall, a tiny kitchenette with a 2-burner stove, and a window that looked out onto the alley behind Tony's Pizza. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. Nobody could pack my belongings while I slept. Nobody could question my motives or make me feel unwelcome in my own space. I picked up every shift I could at Murphy's. Breakfast rush, lunch crowd, dinner service. I became the employee who never said no. My feet ached constantly, my back hurt from carrying heavy trays, but every dollar I earned was a step towards something better. I started tutoring kids in the neighborhood, helping them with their English papers for $10 an hour. I sold my college textbooks, my jewelry, anything I could live without. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, shopped at thrift stores, walked everywhere to save on gas. Some nights, I'd lie on that Murphy bed and stare at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city, sirens, music from the bar across the street, the occasional argument from neighboring apartments. And I'd think about Jake and Brittany in their beautiful house, probably discussing nursery colors and baby names, believing they'd done the right thing. The anger sustained me through those first few months. But gradually, something else took its place: pride. I was doing this. I was surviving, rebuilding, becoming someone stronger than I'd ever been before. Then, exactly 1 year after I'd been thrown out, my phone rang. The caller ID said Jake, and I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. I'd been promoted to assistant manager at Murphy's by then, had saved enough to buy a used couch and a real bed, had even started taking night classes in digital marketing at the community college. My little apartment above the laundromat had become home. Evelyn. His voice was different, shaky, desperate, nothing like the confident older brother who'd once been my hero. Hi, Jake. We need help. The words seemed to catch in his throat. The marketing firm went under. The economy, you know? And we couldn't make the mortgage payments. The bank, they foreclosed last month. I sat down heavily on my second-hand couch, the one I'd found at a garage sale, and reupholstered myself. I'm sorry to hear that. We're staying at a motel right now, but we can't afford it much longer. The baby, Evelyn. Emma's 8 months old now, and this place isn't safe for her. There was a drug bust 3 doors down last night. I closed my eyes, picturing my brother, who'd once had everything together, holed up in some roadside motel with a baby. Despite everything, it hurt to hear the desperation in his voice. What about Brittany's family? I asked. They cut us off after the business failed. Said we should have been more responsible with money. His laugh was bitter. Funny how people disappear when things get tough. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jake, why are you calling me? Silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of everything unsaid over the past year. Finally, he spoke. Because you're the only family we have left. Because I was wrong, Evelyn. Brittany. She admitted she lied about you. She was jealous, scared of sharing me with anyone else, even my sister. She made it all up. The words I'd dreamed of hearing for 12 long months. The vindication I'd craved during those nights when I questioned everything about myself. But now that it was here, it felt hollow, too little and far too late. She made it up, I repeated flatly. I should have believed you. I should have defended you. I was a coward and a terrible brother, and I'm sorry. God, Evelyn, I'm so sorry. I walked to my window and looked down at the alley where I'd once thought I'd hit rock bottom, where I'd actually found my strength. What do you want, Jake? Can we stay with you? Just for a few months while I find work? I know your place is small, but we'll sleep on the floor. We'll stay out of your way. Please, Evelyn. I'm begging you. I thought about that guest room in Naperville, with its inspirational wall art and the comfortable bed where I'd slept until boxes appeared in the hallway. I thought about Jake walking away without saying goodbye, choosing his wife's lies over his sister's truth. I need to think about it, I said. How long? I'll call you back. For the next week, he texted me every day. Photos of baby Emma, updates on their situation, increasingly desperate pleas. Our parents started calling too. I'd reconnected with them after months of silence, and apparently Jake had reached out to them for support. You have to help them, Mom said during one particularly difficult phone call. They have a baby, Evelyn. Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. Where was that advice when I was sleeping on basement floors and living on ramen noodles? Finally, I called him back. No. The word came out clearer and stronger than I'd expected. I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop near the community college, the one where I'd spent countless hours studying for my digital marketing certification. The same certification that had just landed me a promotion to social media coordinator at a local nonprofit. What? Jake's voice cracked through the phone. I said no, Jake. You can't stay with me. Silence. Then, Evelyn, please. We have nowhere else to go. Emma needs stability, and I promise we'll. You threw me out when I had nothing, I interrupted, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. You believed lies about me without giving me a chance to defend myself. You packed my things like I was garbage to be disposed of. I know I was wrong. And now you want me to risk everything I've built? This isn't just about forgiveness, Jake. It's about trust. How do I know Brittany won't decide I'm a threat again? How do I know you won't choose her over me the next time she feels insecure? It'll be different this time. You're right. It will be different. Because this time, I have something to lose. I have a job I love, an apartment that's mine, a life I've built from nothing. And I'm not putting that at risk. I could hear him crying softly, and it broke something inside me. This was my big brother who'd once scared away my childhood bullies, who'd held me when our parents died, who'd been my hero for most of my life. The kids are innocent in this, he said, playing his final card. So was I replied. And I was right. They are innocent, Jake. Which is why I've already contacted 3 family shelters in the area and emailed you the information. I've also reached out to a friend who works for a job placement agency. She's expecting your call. You're really saying no? I'm really saying no. After I hung up, I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, watching people come and go with their laptops and their problems and their ordinary lives. I felt lighter somehow, like I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying for too long. Jake and Brittany did find a shelter, and eventually transitional housing. He got a job at a smaller marketing firm, and they slowly rebuilt their lives. We exchange Christmas cards now, and I've met Emma a few times at neutral locations. She's a beautiful little girl with Jake's eyes and our father's smile. But they've never set foot in my home. Not my apartment above the laundromat, not the small house I eventually bought in a quiet neighborhood, not anywhere that belongs to me. Because some betrayals cut too deep to heal completely, and some doors once closed should stay that way. I learned something important during that year of rebuilding. Being family doesn't give someone the right to destroy you. Love doesn't mean accepting lies and betrayal. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for them, is to say no. My brother kicked me out over his wife's lies. When they became homeless, I helped them find resources and support. But I never let them back into my life the way they'd been before. Some bridges, once burned, leave ashes that are impossible to clear away. And that's okay. I built new bridges, better ones, with people who chose to believe in me from the start. My life is full and rich and mine in ways it never was when I was depending on other people's charity and conditional love. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's living well despite what others tried to take from you. I closed that door and never looked back. This story is a testament to the power of self-respect and the strength it takes to rebuild your life when those closest to you let you down. Sometimes saying no is the most powerful word in your vocabulary.